World Business Watch. WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is one.
To bring the benefits of the Subhash Chandra Show to your educational institution, teachers and students, send an invitation to Juhi Jha at juhi@such.org.in.
Vielleicht nur als 5%.
Hello and welcome. You are watching Race to Power. I'm Molly Gambhir. Here's a quick look at what's coming your way on the show tonight. As EU leaders gather at the summit in Brussels, a lot at stake. What's the agenda? What are the expectations? We get you live updates from on the ground. We also get you updates from the United States, where a fresh controversy is raging after the US Health Secretary fired members of a vaccine advisory panel and replaced them with his own picks. A lot brewing there now. We tell you more about what the newly reconstituted panel has said and the implications. All this and more coming up. EU leaders have gathered at a summit in Brussels. Two issues on top of the agenda primarily are Europe's defense priorities and US tariffs. Now, the summit is being held just a day after NATO's European members gave in to Donald Trump's demand of increasing defense spending to 5% of the GDP. The threat of America abandoning the military alliance basically pushed the heightened military expenditure through. But the reality is now starting to set in, it seems. And the question is, how will European nations actually afford the substantial increase amid the flailing economies? Now, Europe's problem has been compounded by Trump's reciprocal tariff threat, which hangs in balance. Donald Trump first slapped retaliatory tariffs in April, but suspended them for 90 days to basically allow countries an opportunity to strike a deal.
The problem is that on behalf of the United States, we have a heavyweight deal maker. On our side, European Union, we have a light capacity and capability leaders to negotiate. So the problem is that the American negotiator is very strong. Our negotiators are rather weak. That's the problem.
Now, Spain is the lone NATO member that secured an agreement to opt out of the 5% defense spending target. But the tariff challenge still looms large, even if Spain's Prime Minister calls the United States a friend.
From a more political point of view, what I want to convey is that Spain is an open country.
It is a country that is friendly to its friends, and we consider the United States a friend of Spain.
And for Germany's new chancellor, it is an uphill political and economic battle right at the beginning of his term.
This is my first time here. We have a large number of topics to discuss, of course the reverberations of yesterday's NATO summit and the consequences for the European Union. We will have to talk about the competitiveness of European industry.
Trump's tariffs are suspended only till July 9, remember. And the European Union has little time left to negotiate and determine what cards it can play. And the fact is, the ongoing summit in Brussels is critical for the bloc to actually decide its next move.
46%, we're charging them 20. So
I'm going straight across now to our correspondent, Denslow, with us. Thanks very much for being here. We've been, tracking the reactions, like we just played out for our viewers that have been coming in. A lot at stake, a huge decision-making up ahead for the EU, and time is running out. What are you gathering at this point?
Well, when it comes to defence spending, that has been a huge topic of the conversation between the 27 European Union leaders so far at this summit, before they tackle issues such as tensions in the Middle East, as well as the ongoing trade dispute with the United States. But we have had a little bit of information and a communique that has been released by the European Union's 27 leaders on defence, of course, 23 of whom were at the NATO summit in The Hague earlier this week. Now, in this communique, they say that the European Union needs to continue to substantially increase expenditure on defence and security and to invest better together. They also vowed to scale up production. What they say going forward is that they want to have a check-in in October and also be provided with a roadmap by the European Commission on how exactly to turn this talk about more defence spending into tangible action, as many of these countries have now signed up to that pledge to increase defence spending to 5% of annual GDP by 2035.
Right, there's also that aspect of the defence priorities, also, the optics as far as the EU is concerned, because the last couple of months, specifically the last couple of weeks or so, have been a huge test for the bloc as well, to actually show what it can do when it comes to, putting up a united front and also putting a way forward when it comes to key global issues.
That's absolutely right. So this is often a criticism charged at the European Union, that there might be plenty of talk, but somewhat lacking occasionally when it comes to concerted action, considering the fact that there are 27 individual states, member states, that need often to be on board with any kind of proposal. The European Commission in recent months, for example, has provided a mechanism that could unlock over $800 billion when it comes to defence spending, but there are still differences in the bloc as to whether to access it. We've heard from the Netherlands representative Dick Schoof, who said earlier today that essentially there's no such thing as free money, saying that he was reluctant to join some EU mechanisms when it comes to defence spending. So that just gives a little bit of an example of some of the divisions there on what the EU can do to make sure it can back up its calls and promises to Washington to do more on defence. And we've also seen more areas of schisms within the bloc, things like going forward on Russia. All eyes are on whether an 18th round of Russian sanctions can be passed, but there are holdouts, including from Slovakia as well as Hungary. Also, when it comes to tensions in the Middle East, we've heard from several countries, including Spain and Slovenia, as well as Ireland, that want tangible action to condemn Israel's military activities in Gaza, but that's not uniform. The likes of Germany are opposed to such an action being taken.
All right, so clearly a lot at stake and a very significant time. We're leaving it there for the moment. Will, thanks very much. And let's now shift focus to the United States, where the Health Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., is facing criticism over his decision to fire the vaccine panel. Current and former employees of the Center for Disease Control took to the streets outside the agency's Atlanta headquarters. Protesters held placards saying, "Save lives and save public health." The demonstrations coinciding with the first meeting of Kennedy's controversial new advisory committee. Kennedy recently fired all 17 members of the CDC's advisory committee on immunization practices and appointed his own picks to replace them. At least 2 CDC staffers have resigned in protest of this shakeup.
There have been rallies here every Tuesday since March, but today is especially important because this is the first meeting of this new, and I would say bogus, Advisory Committee for Immunization Practices, ACIP. Kennedy, as most people know, fired the previous members of ACIP, and the few people that he's put on it are not competent.
The Immunization Committee's recommendations shape the official U.S. policy as far as immunization is concerned. And the newly appointed committee has said that it would review the use of older vaccines and re-evaluate immunization timeline for children and teens. Now, critics are saying that the new timelines could undermine decades of science-based guidance.
Science should serve the public, not politics. That public health is a right, not a luxury. And that people inside the agency must be allowed to do their work freely, transparently, and without fear. The stakes have never been higher. We all know vaccines save lives. Science protects communities, and public health is worth fighting for.
And in another sweeping policy change, he announced that the U.S. will halt contribution to the Global Vaccine Alliance. With America being one of the biggest donors, its pulling out from the Global Vaccine Alliance will be hitting the agency's operations hard. And let's go straight across now to our correspondent, Susan Teherani, who's been tracking those developments very closely. Susan, a lot at stake, also a lot of concern over what might follow, because, we're talking about critical issues to do with the health of children and teens over here. But just explain to our viewers why this move was undertaken, because it's important to also contextualize the Health Secretary's tricky equation as far as vaccine safety is concerned.
Yeah, that's such a valid question, Molly, and I'm so glad that you brought it up. RFK was concerned that of this 17-member panel, the majority of them had conflict of interest with vaccine companies and pharmaceutical companies. And just as, these pharmaceutical companies lobby at Congress, for example, they could have the potential of making recommendations and lobbying because of the conflict of interest with this panel. This is RFK Jr.'s elaboration on the issue, and he's replaced them now with only 8 members. However, now there is concern, notably by the American Academy of Pediatricians, that these 8 members, they may not have conflict of interest, but they're known to be, quote unquote, vaccine skeptics. And so that's why we see sort of this debate, and also the demonstrations and protests that we've been seeing in recent days outside of the office, the immunization office, by parents and those that are concerned that perhaps his moves and what this panel recommends will create not only vaccine skepticism, but sort of a confusion about what to do next and what vaccines are effective and what aren't in the days and weeks and years ahead.
Indeed, Susan, we're leaving it there for the moment. Thanks very much. Let's now shift focus. The Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has lashed out hard at Israel and the United States. In that address after the Israel-Iran war, Khamenei declared the war that lasted nearly 2 weeks as an outright victory over Israel.
I want to congratulate the great Iranian nation. I would like to offer a few congratulations to the nation. First, congratulations on the victory over the fallacious Zionist regime. Despite all the noise and claims, the Zionist regime almost collapsed under the blows of the Islamic Republic.
And this was the Supreme Leader's third video address since the Israel-Iran war. His address also coming amid the speculation of his whereabouts since the war broke out. Earlier today, the Iranian Supreme Leader shared visuals of Iran's Operation True Promise 3, stating that the Islamic Republic destroyed that myth of Israel's invincibility. That's the claim that's been made. And the Supreme Leader also spoke about Iran's retaliation against the United States. He responded to America's Operation Midnight Hammer over Tehran, claiming that Iran dealt the US what he called a severe slap with the attack on its base in Qatar.
The President of the United States exaggerated events in unusual ways, and it turned out that he needed this exaggeration. Anyone who has heard these words has understood that there is another truth behind these words. They had failed to take action and had not achieved their intended objective.
And the United States dropped the biggest conventional bombs in its arsenal on Iranian nuclear facilities. US President Donald Trump claimed that the cell bombers dropped explosives that obliterated Iran's Fordo site. The investigation into Iran's nuclear ability post the US and Israel strikes is still ongoing.
Inside the mission space.
And we're shifting focus for now. The head of Amnesty Kenya has said at least 16 people have died, most of them killed by the police, and over 400 have been injured during the nationwide anti-government protests there. A year after deadly demonstrations against the tax bill culminated in the storming of the parliament, we're looking at these scenes. According to local media, thousands of Kenyans took to the streets to commemorate last year's demonstrations in which more than 60 people had died, with the police firing tear gas and water cannons to disperse them in the capital. Kenya National Commission on Human Rights noted heavy police deployment and allegations of excessive use of force, including rubber bullets, live ammunition and water cannons, resulting in numerous injuries. Initially peaceful commemorations descended into chaos as scattered groups ripped up flagstones to throw projectiles at security forces and chanted for the resignation of the president. State-funded body Independent Policing Oversight Authority has said at least 61 people were arrested during the protests. An official at the capital's main Kenyatta National Hospital has said the facility had received dozens of injured people. The government ordered TV and radio stations to halt the live coverage of the protests, which gained momentum beyond the capital, including in the port city Mombasa and in the towns of Matu and Nyeri, among others. Although last year's protests faded after the president withdrew proposed tax hikes, public anger has remained over the use of excessive force by security agencies. Outrage flared over police brutality, particularly after a blogger and teacher was killed in custody earlier this month. A group of peaceful protesters attacked last week by a gang of motorbike riding goons, as they are known in Kenya, armed with whips and clubs and working in tandem with the police.
We are protesting because we want justice for Ojwang, justice for all those who have been killed through police brutality. That's all we ask for. We urge the government to let us demonstrate peacefully instead of chasing us away violently.
We strongly condemn the use of goons to disperse peaceful protesters. Whatever you reap, you will sow. If politicians continue using goons as a tactic, you will face the wrath of Kenyans. Don't try to replicate what is happening in Haiti here in Kenya.
On to Colombia now, where the president has signed into law a major labor reform aimed at strengthening workers' rights. While the move has been celebrated by trade unions and progressive groups, employers are warning it could increase costs and hit small businesses negatively. The law marks one of Petro's most ambitious social policy victories in a way, and for the government and its allies in the trade unions, restoring basic workers' rights that were gradually stripped away since the early 1990s. Now, the new law includes a series of measures: a shorter working day, strict limit on weekly overtime with well-defined day and night shift timings, surcharge pay as much as 100% for working on a holiday or weekly off. It also aims to reduce reliance of short-term contact for stable employment. Law makes inclusion of disabled people in the workforce mandatory. It proposes no disciplinary process before contract termination. The law is passed, but not without a compromise. Efforts to extend paternity leave or grant time off for menstrual health issues were dropped in final negotiations. And while formal employees will get the benefit of the law, informal workers, who make up a large portion of Colombia's labor force, may see little immediate benefit. The victory in passing the labor reform has infused Petro with confidence. He has vowed to push for a broad constitutional reform that aims to fulfill his campaign promise of the social transformation. But while supporters are calling it a rights recovery, opponents, including business groups and some unions, are warning it could backfire. The argument against the reform is that raising the cost of formal employment could hurt small businesses and trigger higher unemployment at a time when Colombia is facing economic realities that are difficult.
Del trabajador, centrales obreras y
Nearly 3 years after the assassination of the Haitian president, former acting Prime Minister Claude Joseph faced tough questions from judges. Joseph was the country's top official when the president, Moise, was gunned down in his private residence in 2021. He is one of the people who have been indicted in the ongoing investigation. Joseph was grilled for nearly 4 hours by the judge, who repeatedly pressed him on one question: how could he be unaware about the plot to assassinate a president of the country while holding the position of the prime minister?
Everyone, including myself, finds it rather curious that a head of state was assassinated in his home without any reaction from his guards. All this clearly demonstrates the degree of complexity of the plot.
And the other suspects in the case are now being held in the United States, where federal courts are handling part of the case, with suspect waiting for the trial to begin. President Moise's widow, who survived the attack but was seriously injured, is expected to testify in that U.S. case, but her cooperation remains uncertain in Haiti. Despite a judge's request, Martine Moise is not expected to travel back to testify in person. She also has been indicted by Haitian authorities, facing allegations of complicity and criminal association, which she firmly denies. With nearly 3 years gone, the assassination of Moise continues to impact political landscape as the search for the real culprit continues. And during a parliamentary debate on Wednesday, June 25th, the French Assembly was interrupted when rainwater seeped into the parliament through leaks in its roof. A storm swept much of France, forcing the lawmakers to pause their proceedings. Take a look.
Je viens de le voir, Monsieur le Premier ministre. On m'avait dit. Vous ferez attention avant de monter. Alors, à ce sujet, mesdames et messieurs, juste là. On va envoyer les pompiers. Je vais suspendre la séance pour 5 minutes, le temps que les pompiers viennent expertiser tout ça.
On that note, it's a wrap on this edition of Race to Power. This is me, Molly Gambhir, signing off. Thanks for watching.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
WION Health Resort is unique, the only one of its kind. Experience the 4 paths of natural wellness: yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy. Each uniquely customized program improves the whole person to make every person whole. Come to WION Health Resort. Make your reservation at WION.com.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide, because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION, world is one.
To bring the benefits of the Subhash Chandra Show to your educational institution, teachers and students, send an invitation to Juhi Jha at juhi@such.org.in.
The Earth is sending distress signals. Wildfires, droughts, and melting glaciers. Can we reverse the damage? Explore the harrowing effects of climate change. It's a wake-up call. Global emergency. Climate Tracker on WION World is One.
We're giving an AI-generated video where we can analyze your credit history, your credit score.
It's all about now content. A lot of it is now digital. A lot of TV content is still being watched.
I think it's been a fantastic journey. We have succeeded in some of our original goals, which was to bring credit accessibility to both companies and individuals.
Key milestones of traction under your leadership.
Getting actually a personal check from Mr. Ratan Tata. We got an opportunity to get listed.
One of the biggest things that has changed in Razorpay over the last 5-6 years is to be a single product, single business company to a multi-product, multi-business company.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch. WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide, because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is one.
Hello and welcome. You're watching Beyond World is One. My name is Mohammed Saleh, and let's start this broadcast by taking a quick look at what is making headlines at this hour. The American Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth insists that the American strikes on the Iranian nuclear sites were a success, backing President Donald Trump and also berating the American media for covering an intelligence report that had questioned the results of the operation. The World Health Organization has said it has delivered its first medical shipment into Gaza since the 2nd of March, adding, though, that 9 truckloads are nothing more than a drop in the ocean. The Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has asked a court to postpone his testimony in his long-running corruption trial after the American President Donald Trump called for the case to be cancelled altogether. Ukraine and Russia exchange a new group of captured soldiers, the latest in a series of prisoner swaps agreed at peace talks in Istanbul early in the month. A divided Supreme Court rules against Planned Parenthood,